Hello and welcome to What the FinTech. We're a podcast by FinTech Futures, and I am joined here by Ricardo, founder and CEO of Incode. Ricardo, thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Heather.
It's very nice to have you. We have a special edition today. We're actually live at Money20 USA. So welcome to all of our in-person listeners.
Oh, very, very happy to be with you here.
Yes, likewise. We've got a really good conversation. So timely and necessary topic we're covering here about the future of fraud prevention.
Yeah.
We're going to dig into a lot of things. We're talking about AI and deepfakes becoming more and more sophisticated every day. This episode is going to look at about how technology is tackling these fraud challenges, about what the future is going to look like, and explaining current threats, new types of deepfakes, what companies can do to protect themselves. Let's start from the beginning, though. I'd love to hear a little bit more about yourself and your background and how you got into the space with fraud and AI.
Got it. Yes, I come from an entrepreneurial background, and originally I'm from Mexico City. And as you know, in the whole Latin America, there's a lot of fraud. And fraud is not about losses. It's about lack of access. Because of fraudsters, then it's difficult to get access to financial services, particularly those who had the least. So from that background, when I started getting into identity, I understood that the power of identity is to create trust. There's actually a World Bank index called the Interpersonal Trust Index that measures how people trust each other to interact. And because everything that we do to transact starts with identity, whether you're paying, whether you're getting into your bank account, it's all about identity. If identity is strong, the rest is strong. And so we understood that for 1% of interpersonal trust that we can help create, there's a 0.83% increase in GDP. So that's what inspired me. And so by having started me personally from LATAM and then moving to the US, it helped me understand the world, I would say, in a slightly different world that is good for identity.
Yes, very impactful in that case,
Yes.
indeed. Well, the state of financial fraud has been changing rapidly.
Yeah.
The state of fintech is changing rapidly, but I think financial fraud leads it all. So AI and deepfakes have been brought to new levels. From your perspective, what's most alarming in the trends we're seeing right now?
Deepfakes are going to be the worst crisis that I think the financial industry and broadly the world has had since before the credit bureaus were formed. Every non-person interaction, whether you're talking to someone over Zoom, you're having a phone call, or you're doing an online onboarding, you're not going to be sure if the person who's portraying to be that person is really that identity, and second, whether it's even human. And so that is going to bring a set of challenges, but I predict that in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be about 5 to 10 times more fraud, and then it's going to get better.
Oh, all right. So we have some work cut out for us and some urgency there.
Yes.
Can you walk us through how deepfakes are actually surpassing the identity verification systems that are in place today?
Yes, because there was a very specific assumption when all these systems were started, which is that you could go to somewhere physical. Then COVID started, pushed all these companies, banks, governments to try and move into the digital space. But yet, we were all trusting that the phone would be secure, that you could apply normal liveness, as you can see vendors around here. But now it's not true. There's many attacks where they can actually take control of your camera, take control of your device, be able to create a deepfake with a 30-box type software, really, really cheap, and try to impersonate. So the world needs definitely a new approach.
And I think that's on an individual and a business level. You're
Yes.
probably seeing fraud on all accounts across the board.
Yes. It's Deloitte is estimating that by 2027, the losses on deepfake for financial services is going to be over 40 billion. And that's just financial services. But as you're saying, is the first time that even all the companies are going to be attacked and they're at risk. For example, when you're interviewing someone, particularly in a remote setting, when the person is never going to go to the office, how do you know that that person is who they say they are? Or for example, when you're resetting your phone for MFA, you buy a new phone, try to enroll one, how do you verify your identity? Or for example, you're giving or given wire transfer instructions. How do you know that you're really talking to the broker? So it's not just the financial services companies, but it's also every company in the world have to start thinking, what is the type of perimeter protection that the companies need to put so that every interaction with the outside is safe?
Well, you queued us up. Tell us, what is the protection that companies need to put in place? What is Incode doing? What are the new technologies that are working against these systems?
Right. Incode has had these theses that in order to create the most accurate identity system that stops the most fraud, there's two things that you have to have. You have to have very deep AI technology. That, everybody says AI now, but we've been doing that for 8 years. But you have to recognize technology is not enough. You have to have a network approach, meaning people have to contribute into a network where we can understand who are the small people, the small amount of people that are actually doing fraud. And if someone is trying to do a fraud in company A, we can stop it in company B. So our thesis has always been technology plus network working together to predict war. So if we go to particularly deepfakes, we've done two things. One thing is we created the most advanced deepfake detection software and injection attack software. We call it personhood. So it's how do you prove you're human, that you're alive, and that you have a trusted device. That in conjunction with the concept of network, meaning we have hundreds of millions of identities and billions of identity signals working together, AI trying to learn from those graphs to understand if the person we're talking is human or not. And the second thing is government and companies together are coming to create a digital identity system that completely bypasses the ID. And so when you're going to do onboarding in the future, the only thing you're going to need to do is just scan the barcode of your driver license, do personhood detection, and we're going to be able to prove that you're you for all these number of use cases, which I think have major amount of impact.
Yeah, you're right. And so we're seeing pieces of that come together, but it is going to take this collaboration between entities that is necessary for us to make this happen. And you touched on it a little bit with some of the tools that you're using and some of the AI you're using, but can you go into more detail about how the machine learning and biometric verifications and AI and everything else is really helping to stay ahead of the fraud?
Yes. So when you're taking a selfie, so biometrics, first of all, is a very important piece, right? Everybody's using their phone to prove who you are. But the truth is that there's a big problem is originally, what was the artifact that you used to prove yourself? And in that case, usually it's a driver license, right, in the US, and someone verifying the driver license. But it's really cheap and easy to buy almost perfect driver licenses. So the question is, biometrics is going to take a big role? Yes. I think most of the authentication systems, at least the first time that you're proving who you are going to be with biometrics. And the way it works is, as you take a selfie, AI is analyzing all the different pixels. It's analyzing all the different signals on the phone. And it's coming together to prove, A, is it a deepfake or not? B, is a camera trusted? And C, is that a real person or you're trying to impersonate the person with a video or a photo? At the same time, there's something that's really special. And we took the cue from India. India was very smart 15 years ago, where they said, why, if we're trying to transform the country, why print IDs while you can use a completely digital biometric system to verify who they are? And so they launched the system. In 15 years, they were one of the least trusted societies in the world. And now is the highest trusting society because they have the strongest digital identity system. And so we're taking a cue from that. We built a system like that in collaboration with the Mexican government in Mexico with huge impact. We almost eliminated identity fraud. It was so successful that now there are laws that say that if you want to open a bank account online, you have to use that system. We did it in other countries in Latin America like Colombia. And 4 years ago in the US, we started working with all the state governments to create this public-private partnership where you can verify your face and directly check against the source of truth, against the DNBs, if you're who you are. So it doesn't matter if you bring the best deepfake on IDs or fake IDs, you're going to be able to prove with a level of accuracy that's not known here in the US.
It's amazing. And especially because the process now of the quick biometric check and the selfie is so much easier than it used to be back in the beginning. It's okay if you have glasses on. I mean, it's going to recognize you. It knows.
Yes, and it's privacy-centric. So at the end, if you understand where the US is going in terms of regulation, where state by state, they're regulating social media, they're regulating adult entertainment, online gambling, you have to prove part of who you are. Not necessarily maybe your name or last name, but you have to prove if you're over 18, over 21, you want to open a bank account. And so there's going to be a smarter identity system where with companies like Incode, you create an account, you trust Incode, we vectorize everything is secure. And then as you try to prove who you are, it's going to take a very small amount of interaction, probably your face and the phone, and you're going to be able to prove parts of your identity and not give out all those information, all that identity information that you give when you're going to buy beer at the neighborhood store.
Right. We're not passing out our social for everything.
Exactly.
Now, real life scenarios are important to this. I know even as you've been talking, people are thinking about how they scan their license at an airport now and all of the places that we have used biometrics. We've all had personal instances when we've had friends and family members that are caught by deepfakes and
Right.
fraud. And like you said, we're going to see a lot more of this over the next 5 years.
Yes.
Can you walk us through some specific examples and stories you've seen about how the scammers are working on a regular basis and how Incode has been able to intercept and reduce that fraud?
Absolutely. There's two examples that come to mind. One example is happening to companies. Actually happened to us about a year ago. Our head of treasury got a WhatsApp, and then went into a Zoom call with, eventually we found it was a fraudster, but it's a live deepfake. Someone that was portraying to be me, talking, looking, and having the same mannerisms, explaining my head of treasury that we were doing a secret M&A and that we needed to fund an escrow account to go through the M&A. And he had to keep quiet. He went into the Zoom call. He went to Teams. He went to phone calls. So it was a 2-hour long interaction. And as the person was about to send a wire transfer, he called our CFO. The CFO didn't know about it. And eventually they had to send someone to my home to verify that if I was the right person talking to them. It just felt so weird.
Yeah.
And so, for example, that's something that as we talk to CEOs of global companies, Fortune 500, they are having that same level of attacks. So that's one story. And certainly with a launch that we're doing January this coming year, it's called DeepSight, is all these set of AI and Gen AI tools to protect against deepfake, and it's going to be a game changer. So that's one story. The second story is probably my favorite one. And it's very timely because of the election cycle. So we were hired by certain states, including the state of Nevada, for this election and last election, where we were part of the ballot clearing process. So essentially, when someone sent a ballot and the signature didn't match, we were tasked, we had to send a link to the voter. The voter would have to scan their driver license, do biometrics, do liveness, and would have to verify that the voter was real or was fraud. What's interesting is we found a lot of fraud. Those votes ended up determining the composition of the House, which is incredibly interesting. And the gentleman that hired us, which is the Democrat Secretary of State of Nevada, was incredibly happy, and the one coming was Republican. So my board was completely against it because of the political risk. We went through, we did it anyways, and it was a great story of how you can actually take a status quo, which in that case is a piece of paper and a signature, which are very, very kind of old methods of identification, and substitute it with a modern one and create trust in the process.
Yeah, that trust is very important because it's the foundation of everything that we're built here. So
Yes.
Quite substantial story. Thank you. As we talk about trust in financial services and using AI in these processes, there's a big debate going on about ethics in AI.
Yes.
So what is the code and what is the stance that Incode is taking with ethically responsible AI?
Yes. The first thing is everything is private first. We won't do anything without the user's consent, number one. Number two, we care very much about bias. All these AI systems have bias, but I would argue that, every human has bias, and actually the human bias is much worse. It's proven that after 200 times that within a day, someone has seen an ID, the performance of a human being is extremely low. Mm-hmm. AI is by far the greatest, and we care very much about bias and making sure that it's as unbiased as possible. The third thing that we care about it is the way we store data. We store the data in vectors, meaning at some point you have to assume that you're going to get hacked. Mm-hmm. But if you get hacked, are you going to get PII, or you get just ones and zeros that nobody can understand? Mm-hmm. And so that's the way we think about it. And finally, as you go into a world of agents, right, we want to make sure that we engage with the broader community on this discussion around how to regulate AI and regulate some of the software to fight bad AI. And at the same time, you need to be able to understand how are we going to enable agents and how those agents are going to have their own identity and their own power of attorney. So it's quite a loaded topic that we care very much about.
It is loaded. Part of that ethically responsible conversation goes on to making sure that you've got consumer trust and the consumers are feeling safe, but there's a balance within feeling safe and having a good user experience.
Yes.
So how are you balancing that, and what has your experience been on consumer feedback there?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. And particularly in the US, Apple played a role of normalizing the use of facial recognition. Yeah. So we all use it for our phone, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they did a great job at understanding how you can secure that. And so that helped us that way. The second is on COVID. It also encouraged a lot of people to try and use the systems as opposed to trying to go physically. So that also helped. And look, at the end, the name of the game is reusability. The US being such a decentralized country, it's literally 51 countries in one, each state with some regulation and ideas. I think there's a very strong business need to have a set of companies that consumers are going to open an account with. And then you're going to use that account to verify parts of your identity. For consumers, it's a great way to open very quickly a bank account, make sure that you're not sending your information everywhere. But for businesses, it's also a good opportunity to shield and have more liability protection. So the way the US is structured, which is very different from almost every country in the world, it's going to tend to more of private sector having a stronger role in identity verification rather than the government, as it happens in most countries around the world.
Mm-hmm. So as the U.S. is learning, and has been over the last several years, to be comfortable with biometrics and be comfortable with sharing, I think consumers are happy to give more for a better process, for more speed, like you said, for more ease of use.
Yes.
Have you seen anything that we should be learning from in other countries?
Yes. We have these case studies from India and the ones that we implemented directly where you use biometrics. And I think it's very important that the U.S., the strength of the financial system came from the strength of the databases, particularly the Social Security number, right? Mm-hmm. But these knowledge-based authentication systems are actually very outdated. There's a statistic that 92% of fraudsters can trick all these data-based systems, and only 46% of people in the US can use them. So what's happening is people are understanding that actually just presenting your face, it's a lot safer. It's stored in a non-identifiable way. So it's a lot safer than, say, give away your Social Security number or show your ID. So I think the US is changing significantly. Certainly the world, the only way you can actually verify yourself online is through ID and biometrics. And so I think it's a wonderful time to have honestly, an identity company, particularly when you have to protect with deepfakes and when you have to be able to assign identity to agents.
Yes, indeed. Well, I would like to hear from your experience about Incode. Lessons learned are important to companies that are building around their fraud and identity programs too. Sure. So through your process, what have you seen? What would you suggest to others that are entering, and everyone needs to be working in this space at some point?
Yes. There's a lesson that we learned that being different is okay and can be a source of strength. And let me explain why. We started the company here. It's a combination of American, Latin American, Eastern European talent. And the first market was Latin America, was Mexico and Brazil. And at first, investors didn't understand why that was good. And they didn't understand at first that in Latin America, particularly Mexico and Brazil, there's between 4 to 12 times more fraud than in the US. There's no databases to do correlation and checks. There's very new people into the financial system, very low-end phones. So in those circumstances, we had to solve the identity problem. We had to actually fight fraud in a place where fraud is very common. And so after we did that, and we had kind of have the existential threat of, if we don't solve it, we're going to go under. Once we started then moving as a marketing to the US and Europe, we found that our technology flew. It really solved a lot of the problems. And the reason why right now we're more prepared than ever than anybody else at fighting deepfakes for fraud, for identity fraud, is because we're seeing them first in LATAM. We saw them a year and a half ago, those deepfakes. They were attacking our customers. We have to move fast to create technology. And so now that I think deepfakes are going to take the main stage, we're more prepared than ever. So my lesson would be, even though on some level it might not help on pattern recognition with some of these VCs, and it might take a longer time to raise, as it happened for RAA, pursuing your own path, right, and having conviction of what you're doing, at the end pays off, because that's part of the reason why Incode is so good.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the VCs, and we're here in a wealth of fintech surrounding us. Everybody's talking about AI. What's next for AI and fintech from your perspective?
Yeah, I said that in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be more fraud than ever. Yeah. But I think in the next 10 years, there's going to be almost no identity fraud. Why? Because you need, as a human being, you need an existential crisis to be able to change. And this crisis, which is called deepfakes, are going to motivate companies, governments, and people to come together and create these or contribute to this network where just a very small percentage of people are doing fraud and the rest are good people, good companies. Mm-hmm. But by sharing and collaborating, we're going to kill identity fraud. Identity fraud is just a lack of collaboration. 70 years ago, there was credit fraud. And so credit bureaus came together, were formed, banks came together, shared information, and eventually they curbed down those losses. And it's going to happen the same thing. So what I foresee is a lot of collaboration happening between companies and governments, people with these type of systems. And so we're going to see just a more trustful society. And I think the rate of innovation that Gen AI is taking the world is certainly going to power a lot of the new fintechs, right? And existing ones. And with the upcoming agents, AI agents doing things on our behalf, the key is that we're going to have a very solid, much more solid identity system that is going to make sure that all that is mostly for good and not for bad. That's my prediction for the industry.
Absolutely. And it's necessary at this point because you're going to have those same AI agents fighting against us. So staying in front of that is quite important.
Yes.
I like it. It's exciting. It gives us something, silver clouds to look forward to, silver lining there.
Exactly.
Good.
So, and by the way, like our mission and the thing that motivates me more is our mission to power trust.
Yes.
Power world of trust. And we've seen that when you can de-anonymize people, right? And you have a strong trusting system. I'll give you an example. In Mexico and other places around the world, in the UK, there's a lot of violence in some of the soccer games. People get very passionate. Sometimes even they get infiltrated by political groups. There's violence. And so that happened about 2 years ago in Mexico. There was a very violent game. The World Cup, Mexico was about to lose the World Cup. And so what the Mexican soccer authorities decided is, let's build an identity system where you get verified once, then you authenticate every time you go to a stadium. Doesn't matter which stadium, doesn't matter which team. And if someone misbehaves, that person is going to be banned forever from watching any live sports. And guess what happened? No violent events in 2 years, and attendance went up 22%. So what it means is the power of identity is not just benefiting the companies, in this case, the soccer, just more attendance, more money, certainly not losing World Cup or not losing the franchise, but more importantly, it makes just everything more trustworthy. And so that's something that motivates us and certainly motivates my whole team.
Absolutely. You're making people feel more comfortable. It changes the world that way.
It does certainly change the world. And a lot of companies here in Money20 care about financial inclusion. You cannot have financial inclusion without a better identity system.
Right. Let's talk about that for just a minute, because that's important. Being open and being able to receive a lot of people that are not traditionally banked, it does put you in more susceptible spots. So what are you seeing there?
As I said, just 46% of people in the US can pass through a traditional knowledge-based authentication system. So it's really bad. For example, when I moved to the US about 10 years ago, for 3 years, I couldn't pay my California taxes through a wire transfer because I couldn't get verified with TransUnion. So imagine that, and I'm lucky to be in a position to eventually, be part of that system. But a lot of people in the U.S. and across the world don't get access to that, right? They don't get the ability to transact to then be identified first. So this is a major thing as you go into much more into stable coin, and that's kind of changing the way you send money and how do you forex exchange. As you get into fintechs that are going to be essentially agents doing things on your behalf. The way you have an identity system that is completely inclusive, that works with most of the people, and at the same time fights fraud, is going to bring a lot of money to this industry, but it's also going to bring a lot of social mobility and progress.
It is. It's important for the financial health, and we are seeing those pieces start to expand, so it's exciting for all of us.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Well, Ricardo, this has been wonderful. Is there anything in closing you'd like to say?
Thank you so much. I'm just, as I have these kind of doom and gloom predictions around deepfakes, I am very, very sad about the future of identity and how companies are going to join this effort. I haven't met with any CEO of any bank or fintech across the world that says, I want to beat my competitor with more fraud.
Right.
They'll say, I want to beat my competitor with better services or better product. But everybody's saying, I think we have a responsibility to fight fraud together. And that's the thing that excites me the most.
Yes. That gives us a lot of hope for the future, too.
A lot of it.
Very nice. Well,
thank you so much.